everybody, and welcome to today's video. I'm back. You may have noticed that I haven't been publishing so many videos over the last couple of weeks on this here channel. It's not that I haven't been around. If you visit digitallydownloaded.net, you would have seen that I've been doing plenty of reviews and things in the written form, but we are actually approaching 2 months of a pretty heavy lockdown here in my corner of the world. And it has been getting tiring. It's actually been getting on my nerves, to be honest. So motivation has been a little bit low, but I'm feeling in a better place now, so I should be back to doing my regular lot of videos. There's also a lot to talk about. And the first one I'm going to talk about is Fort Triumph. Now, this is a game that came out on Switch last week, and I picked it up not really knowing much about it. It certainly wasn't on my radar, but in looking at the Switch store, I saw that it was a tactical RPG thing, and as a fan of both tactics and RPGs, I was always going to be interested in seeing if this one could deliver on its promise. The good news is that it largely has done so. Those of you that are a little bit younger have probably never heard of Heroes of Might and Magic before. That's because it hasn't been around in any meaningful sense for quite a few years. Ubisoft bought up the developer quite a few years ago now and has proceeded to do nothing of worth with the series. In fact, the last decent Heroes of Might and Magic release was a HD remaster of Heroes of Might and Magic 3, which is itself, the remaster is a half decade, if not older now. And certainly, the last time there was a new numbered Heroes of Might and Magic game that has been worth playing has been a very, very long time ago now. Ubisoft has no interest in the series. It doesn't fit with the live service nonsense that Ubisoft is obsessed with these days. So I would not expect to see Heroes of Might and Magic make any kind of glorious return unless Ubisoft were to somehow sell off the franchise, which I don't see happening. Anyway, Fort Triumph is, or was at least, interesting to me because it definitely plays on Heroes of Might and Magic, and I love Heroes of Might and Magic. I've actually done a stream on this channel, which I'll link to in the description, of the Game Boy Color port of Heroes of Might and Magic 2. I've been playing this series for a very long time. It has been very disappointing to me that with the series itself being kind of put on ice, the fact that no other developer has really stepped up to do a Heroes of Might and Magic game has also been quite disappointing to me. But this game definitely tries to do that. It has its own twists, which we'll get to shortly, but the most important thing and the biggest quality for me is that this is a genuine attempt to do a Heroes of Might and Magic title. So you've got the ability to build up a base, you have units that you then send around the world to collect resources, battle random monsters, and take on your major opponents as well, and all of that plays exactly like the Heroes of Might and Magic that I remember of yesteryear. So the developers do deserve credit for seeing an opportunity where the mainstream developers have kind of ignored an entire genre as such and have capitalized on that. So that's a good thing. Now, in terms of where this game is different, Heroes of Might and Magic itself is a kind of strategy game series where the goal is to build up an army. By building buildings in a base, you get to recruit large numbers of soldiers. You put those soldiers into units and then attack opponents with a growing army. You'll start off with a couple of dozen basic foot soldiers, but towards the end of the game you'll have flying rocks, dragons, knights, paladins, undead zombies and things. There was dozens and dozens of different units, and the armies themselves would be numbering into the hundreds by the end of a typical scenario. So that is all gone. Instead, what they've done in this game is put an XCOM-like tactics combat system in there. So rather than controlling large armies, you control a small skirmish force of 4 or 5. Can't remember exactly how many you end up with now, but you end up with a small skirmish force, and they all level up individually. So just like in XCOM, they all end up with their own special abilities and their own role and utility on the battlefield. And then when you fight your opponents, it's in small skirmish style combat. The scope is very different is the point. And when I initially started to play the game, I was a little bit concerned about that because for me, carefully constructing those armies was a big deal. But because there's permadeath in Fort Triumph, I ended up caring just as much about these individual units as well, because I knew that if I lost one in a combat, then my entire campaign, my entire game was in jeopardy, because I would be at a significant disadvantage when the next time I had to fight one of these opponents, because all of their units would be of a much higher level, and I would have to deal with that. So that was that was an interesting hook, and because the battlefields are all randomized, because the enemies are randomized from one skirmish to the next, there is a lot of replay value in Fort Triumph, which I also really appreciated. With Heroes of Might and Magic, all the scenarios were kind of designed from the start, and while there was a lot of them in a lot of Heroes of Might and Magic games, having a randomized skirmish approach does give the game an additional layer of replay value if you get really into it. The only problem with Fort Triumph is, well, there's two problems with Fort Triumph, and I do mention these in my review on digitallydownloaded.net, so if you want more coherent and scripted thoughts, you can check out that review. This is me just kind of talking off the cuff. But the two issues that I have with Fort Triumph is, firstly, this game has an appalling sense of humour, and humour is, of course, subjective. What one person finds funny is not necessarily what another person will find funny, but there's a point with humour where it just becomes so overused that it's kind of generic, and I would argue that for even people that are inclined to find that type of humour funny, if you see it enough, you'll stop laughing along with the jokes, and Fort Triumph really does kind of fit into there, because the game really plays on fantasy tropes in a way that a million other games have already done so. So every joke you see in Fort Triumph, you've already seen a million times before. If you play tabletop RPGs, you've probably made most of the jokes that you'll see in Fort Triumph. It just treads such common ground, and it has nothing to really distinguish itself. I don't remember the name of any of the characters in the story mode, even though I played it through not too long ago. There was an archer, there was a wizard, there was a barbarian, and there was a warrior, but I'd be damned if I can remember the names of any of them. I only vaguely remember what was going on in the plot itself. I was mostly cycling through the narrative as quickly as possible so I could get to the next battle or the next objective or whatever. So really I was just playing a linear version of the skirmish mode within the game, and that made the story mode quite uninspiring and uninteresting to me. That's meant to be the main part of the game, and it just didn't deliver. The other issue that I have with the game is the aesthetic. Now also, much like humour, aesthetics are of course very subjective, and obviously, given what I do on this channel and what I review, I'm much more inclined towards the kind of the Japanese style aesthetics in the first place. But I do like Western RPGs and Western games, and I've noticed over recent years especially that there's been a certain approach to fantasy aesthetics in Western games which has just become very copy-paste because it works. And it is basically building on the World of Warcraft style, with those kind of blocky, colourful, cartoony, over-the-top character models, and a kind of shiny glistening about all the graphics. It's all very bold colours, and it's all very cartoonish. And if you've played World of Warcraft, then you'll know what I'm talking about, because this game looks quite familiar with it. But it's also something that you just see over and over again in every kind of free-to-play game. Every MMO, they all use this kind of aesthetic. And it's just at the point now that it becomes hard for me to find something original and creative in a game when it really is just following best practices of what other developers and artists have already done. There's nothing inherently wrong with it. It's certainly technically a proficient looking game, and in the combat sequences in particular, there's these little moments where it sometimes zooms in, so a particularly effective attack will be, you'll get a really good look at it, and it's impressive. It certainly runs nicely on the Switch as well, but it's just so common now that I find it very difficult to really enjoy. And really that's the problem with Fort Triumph. It does a good thing in mixing XCOM, which is a great genre, a great series, with Heroes of Might and Magic, which is a favourite series of mine and something I have strong nostalgia for, combining those two things is certainly a great idea, and they've done a good job in making sure that all the systems work, but there's nothing original about this game either, and that ultimately holds it back. It's something that you're going to play and forget quite quickly. You'll enjoy it while you're playing it, and I certainly would recommend it to anybody that enjoys fantasy tactics games, Heroes of Might and Magic, XCOM. If you like those things, you're going to enjoy this one, but ultimately it doesn't deliver anything that you're going to remember a year from now, let alone 5-10 years down the track. It is not going to be a favourite game of yours. It's really just a time filler, but given that it wants to be replayed quite a lot, I question its effectiveness at that. Anyway, that's enough for this video. If you have been playing Fort Triumph, do let me know your own thoughts in the comments. If you want my more coherent thoughts, again, check out my review on digitallydownloaded.net. But otherwise, yeah, again, I'm back now, so I should be doing more videos in the future. I've got heaps of stuff lined up on my Switch to talk about. It's been a really good couple of weeks for releases, especially of indie games, and I have lots of thoughts to share. Click that like and subscribe button if you enjoy my videos, and that way you won't miss them as I upload them. And if you do enjoy my work, please do consider backing me on Patreon. Even if I do take the occasional break from the YouTube channel, I do a monthly magazine, and I also have the website itself, which I update at least 15 times per week with news, reviews, feature articles, and opinion pieces. And by supporting me on Patreon, you're directly supporting everything that I do and helping me to grow it all, which I desperately want to continue to do because I've got a lot of stuff that I want to do with this games media thing, and your support will help me get there. Alright, thanks as always for tuning in, everybody. We will see you at the next video.